I thought missing the last bus would be the worst thing that happened to me that night. I was wrong. The digital sign above the shelter blinked 11:42 p.m. in cold blue numbers, and the taillights of the Route 16 had already disappeared around the corner, glowing red through the rain like something cruel and final. I stood there with my tote bag clutched against my chest, my sneakers soaked through, my black diner uniform sticking to my skin in all the wrong ways, and tried not to cry over a city bus like my life hadn't already humiliated me enough for one day. The rain came down hard, not gentle spring rain, but the kind that hit the sidewalk in silver needles and bounced back up in mist. My hair was plastered to my cheeks. Water dripped off the tip of my nose. Somewhere across the street, a neon pharmacy sign buzzed and flickered, making the empty block feel even lonelier. I checked my phone again, even though I already knew what I'd see. 3% battery. No rides available under $40. My checking account had $12 and some change until Friday, and Friday felt 1,000 miles away. I laughed under my breath, the sound thin and tired, expensive and low and impossibly clean for a night like this. It slowed as it approached the bus stop, then stopped directly in front of me with the kind of certainty that made my stomach tighten. For 1 second, I told myself it was nothing. Someone checking directions. Someone waiting for a pickup. Then the rear passenger window lowered halfway. Warm light spilled from the interior, soft and gold against the rain. I couldn't see much at first, only the outline of a man in a dark coat, one hand resting near the open door as if he had nowhere else in the world to be. Then I saw his face. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair brushed back, eyes that found mine like they had been looking for me all night. He didn't smile, didn't glance around, didn't ask if I needed help the way a normal person would. He just reached for the handle, pushed the door open, and said in a low, steady voice that somehow cut through the storm, "Get in, Claire." My blood turned to ice. I had never seen that man before in my life, and yet he knew my name. My first instinct was to run. My second was worse. I froze, staring at that open car door like it was the mouth of something that could swallow my life whole. Rainwater trickled down my neck beneath my collar, cold enough to make me shiver, but the air inside that car looked warm, dry, unreal. The man waited without moving, one arm resting against the leather seat, his expression unreadable. Not impatient, not kind either, just certain. "How do you know my name?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. He tilted his head once, like the question itself did not surprise him. "Get in first, Claire." Every warning my mother had ever given me lit up in my head at once, even though she had been gone 3 years and had never once imagined a night like this. Do not get into cars with strangers. Do not trust a man who knows too much. Do not mistake calm for safety. I took 1 step back. Across the street, the man under the awning had stopped pretending not to look at me. Another figure had appeared near the corner deli, both of them lingering too long, watching too closely. Maybe I would have told myself I was imagining it if the driver of the black car had not spoken again, his voice lower now, sharper. "They have been following you since Lexington." My heart gave one hard, painful beat. "What? You dropped your keys outside the diner at 6:15, he said. "You checked over your shoulder 3 times before crossing 47th. And you have been pretending not to notice those 2 men for the last 30 seconds. I could not breathe for a second. He was right. Every bit of it. The rain suddenly felt colder. The city louder. The empty street no longer empty at all. I looked back at the open door, then at him. Up close, he looked even more impossible. All clean lines and dark wool, and eyes too steady for a man sitting in the middle of a storm. "Who are you?" I whispered. His gaze held mine, calm and absolute. "The reason you are still standing here alone is because I got here first." I should have said no. A smart woman would have said no, stepped back, and taken her chances with the rain. But smart had nothing to do with it anymore. Fear did. Instinct did. And something in his voice, that quiet certainty, made the open car door feel less like a trap and more like the only piece of ground that was not collapsing beneath me. I moved before I could talk myself out of it. 1 step, then another, my wet sneakers splashing through the shallow water gathered near the curb. The moment I slid into the back seat, warm air wrapped around me, so suddenly it almost hurt. The door shut with a soft, solid sound that cut off the storm like a curtain dropping. Outside, the city blurred behind rain-streaked glass. Inside, Everything smelled faintly of leather, cedar, and something darker I could not name. Expensive. Controlled. The driver did not turn around. He wore a dark suit and black gloves on the steering wheel, eyes fixed ahead like none of this was unusual. The man beside me reached forward and tapped the privacy screen button. A tinted panel rose slowly between us and the front seat, sealing us into a silence so complete I could hear my own breathing. Seatbelt, he said. I looked at him instead. Up close, he was even more unsettling. Early 30s, maybe. Dark hair, clean-shaven. A charcoal coat fitted over broad shoulders like it had been made for him alone. But it was his face that held me. Not because he was handsome, though he was. Because he looked like a man who never had to repeat himself. Who are you? I asked again, pulling the seat belt across my chest with shaking fingers. He watched me click it into place, then glanced out the rain-covered window as the car eased away from the curb. Adrian Moretti. The name landed in the space between us like it was supposed to mean something. Maybe to some people, it would have. To me, it was just another reason to be afraid. I swallowed hard. And why were you looking for me? His gaze returned to mine, steady and unreadable. Because, Claire, he said softly, someone else was. My throat went dry. What do you mean, someone else was looking for me? The car moved through Midtown with smooth, silent precision, turning corners like the city belonged to it. Outside, rain washed the streets in blurred gold and white, headlights smearing across the glass. Inside, Adrian Moretti sat beside me with one hand resting loosely against his knee, calm as midnight, while my pulse beat so hard it made my fingers tremble. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Men like him probably noticed everything. Start with something simple, I said, forcing the words out before fear could lock them in my chest. How do you know where I work? His eyes shifted to me, dark and unreadable. You have worked the late shift at Monroe's for 8 months. Usually Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Tonight your manager kept you 40 minutes past close because the dishwasher called out sick. I stared at him. The air inside the car suddenly felt thinner. That is not simple, I whispered. He did not apologize. He did not even blink. Simple, he said evenly, is that I know enough to understand you should not go home tonight. A laugh slipped out of me, brittle and unbelieving. You expect me to trust that? No, he said. I expect you to stay alive long enough to hate me properly in the morning. The answer should have sounded arrogant. Somehow it did not. It sounded like fact. The car slowed at a red light, and through the rain-streaked window, I caught the reflection of another dark vehicle half a block behind us. I might have ignored it if Adrian had not glanced toward it at the exact same moment. His expression did not change, but something in his posture did. A sharpening. A stillness that made the space around him feel dangerous in a way he had not needed to explain. He tapped once on the privacy glass. The driver answered immediately through the speaker. Yes, sir. Take the tunnel, Adrian said. Do not go near Queensboro. My stomach twisted. My apartment is in Queens. I know, he said quietly. Then he looked at me with that same impossible steadiness and added, that is exactly why we are not going there. The car left Manhattan behind in a blur of wet glass, tunnel lights flashing overhead in long bands of white that made Adrian's face appear and disappear beside me like something half real. I had stopped trying to understand what was happening and started counting the seconds between my breaths instead. For in, for out. It did not help. Nothing helped. Where are you taking me? I asked. My voice sounded steadier now, which surprised me because inside I was unraveling by the inch. Adrian looked down at his phone only briefly before slipping it back into his coat pocket. Somewhere secure. That is not an address. No, he said calmly. It is better. I turned toward the window, watching the city change around us. Fewer storefronts. Taller buildings. Streets quieter, cleaner, guarded by men under awnings who did not look like doormen so much as soldiers in expensive coats. When the car finally slowed, it did not pull up to a house or a hotel. It stopped beneath the covered entrance of a tower so sleek and dark it looked carved out of the night itself. Before I could reach for the handle, my door opened from the outside. A man in a black suit held an umbrella over me without speaking. Another stood near the entrance, one hand pressed to an earpiece, eyes scanning the street. No one asked Adrian who he was. The glass doors opened the second he stepped forward. That was when something cold settled deep in my stomach. Not because I was surprised he had money. I had known that the moment I saw the car. It was the way everyone moved around him. Quietly. Immediately. Like his presence changed the air. We crossed a marble lobby that smelled faintly of cedar and polished stone. My wet sneakers squeaked against the floor, embarrassingly loud in the silence. Adrian shrugged off his coat and handed it to someone before glancing at me. You are shivering. I am fine. No, he said, his gaze dropping to the rainwater still clinging to my sleeves. You are trying very hard not to fall apart. I opened my mouth with something sharp on the tip of my tongue, but the elevator doors slid open before I could say it. Inside, mirrored walls reflected a girl I barely recognized. Pale face, soaked uniform, frightened eyes too wide for midnight. Beside me stood Adrian Moretti, dry, composed, untouchable. The elevator rose in complete silence until he finally spoke, his voice low enough that I felt it more than heard it. When those doors open, Claire, you are safe. But you need to listen carefully. I looked at him, my hand tightening around the strap of my bag. Safe from who? His jaw shifted once. The smallest movement. The only crack I had seen in him all night. That, he said as the elevator began to slow, is what I am trying to find out. The elevator opened into a private floor, so quiet it felt unreal after the storm. Warm lights spilled across dark wood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, all silver rain and scattered gold below us. It was beautiful in the kind of way that made me instantly uncomfortable. Not cozy, not welcoming, controlled. Every piece of furniture looked chosen, every surface untouched, like no one here ever spilled coffee, missed rent, or came home smelling like fryer oil and exhaustion. I stood just inside the doorway, dripping onto polished hardwood, clutching my bag like it was the last ordinary thing I had left. Adrian stepped aside, giving me space instead of crowding me, which should not have mattered as much as it did. There is a guest room down the hall, he said. Dry clothes are already inside. No one will disturb you. I let out a shaky breath. You had dry clothes ready for me? His expression did not change. I had women on staff make a reasonable guess. It was such a precise, strange answer that I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I watched as he crossed to a sideboard, poured hot water into a mug, and dropped a tea bag into it with the same controlled hands that looked like they belonged in boardrooms, not in the middle of my nightmare. He set the mug on the edge of the marble counter, then took 2 steps back before speaking. Chamomile. It is not poisoned. That was not actually my first concern. It should have been, he said, and for the first time all night, there was something faintly human in his voice. Dry humor. Tired, maybe. I stared at the tea, steam curling upward between us. Why are you being nice to me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Adrian looked toward the rain beyond the glass, his face turning unreadable again. Do not confuse protection with kindness, Claire. The word should have chilled me. Instead, they landed somewhere deeper. Because he had not said he was helping me. He had said he was protecting me. And somehow that felt far more dangerous. I took the tea because my hands needed something to do besides shake. The mug was warm against my palms, almost painfully so, and for a second I just stood there breathing in chamomile and rain, and whatever faint woodsy scent seemed to belong to Adrian himself. Then I made the mistake of looking around too closely. My bag was still over my shoulder. My uniform was damp. My paycheck for the week would barely cover groceries. And here I was standing in a penthouse that looked like the kind of place people in my world only saw in magazines left behind at laundromats. Something hot and humiliating rose in my chest. Protection, I repeated, setting the mug down before I dropped it. That is a nice word for control. Adrian leaned one hand against the marble counter, not blocking me, not coming closer, just watching with that infuriating calm. You think I brought you here to control you? I think men with private elevators and drivers do not usually rescue soaked waitresses out of pure concern. His gaze sharpened, not with anger, but with interest, like I had finally said something worth hearing. Waitress, he said quietly, you do not like being underestimated. I do not like being studied. And yet you notice everything. I folded my arms, suddenly furious that he was right. Furious that he had been right all night. You still have not told me why anyone would be looking for me. For the first time, Adrian did not answer immediately. He glanced toward the hallway, then back at me, weighing something I could not see. Because someone at Monroe's recognized you, he said at last. I blinked. Recognized me from where? That is the question, My stomach tightened. I have lived in New York for 3 years. I work, I go home, I pay rent late, and I call my roommate too much when the subway is creepy. There is nothing to recognize. Adrian's eyes held mine, steady and uncomfortably certain. Claire, he said, ordinary people do not get watched by professionals in the rain. The room went very still. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far across the skyline. I thought about the men near the bus stop, the dark car behind us, the way Adrian had known my route, my shift, my name. Then another thought slipped in, colder than the rest. You said someone at the diner recognized me. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Who? Adrian straightened, his expression closing again like a locked door. That, he said, is what I am going to ask him. Adrian left the room with the kind of silence that did not feel accidental. One moment he was there, all dark wool and controlled stillness, and the next the apartment seemed to exhale around the space he had occupied. I stood alone in the warm light, staring at the hallway where he had disappeared, my heart still beating too fast for a woman holding chamomile in a luxury penthouse at nearly midnight. I told myself to use the guest room, to take the dry clothes, to stop thinking and just survive until morning. Instead, I did what fear always makes people do. I looked for answers where I had been told not to. The apartment was too immaculate to search without feeling obvious, but I was not rifling through drawers or opening doors. I was looking. A framed black and white photograph sat on a shelf near the windows, tucked between 2 art books and a crystal bowl that held absolutely nothing. At first I barely glanced at it. Then I doubled back so fast I nearly spilled my tea. It was an old street photo. Summer, maybe 20 years ago. A woman stood on a Brooklyn sidewalk holding the hand of a little girl with pale hair and a paper flower clipped to the front of her dress. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. I knew that dress. Not the exact dress, maybe, but the flower. The cheap tissue paper petals folded by hand, the green pipe cleaner stem twisted too tightly. My mother used to make those for me when I was little if she could not afford the real thing. My fingers trembled as I lifted the frame. There was writing on the bottom corner in faded ink. For Elena and Daisy. Coney Island, 2004. Daisy. Nobody had called me that in almost 18 years. Not since before my mother packed 2 suitcases in the middle of the night and told me we were changing everything, even my name. A cold wave rolled through me so hard I had to grip the shelf to stay upright. I was still staring at the photograph when I heard Adrian behind me. You were not supposed to see that yet. I turned so quickly the frame knocked against the wood with a sharp sound. He did not look angry. He looked worse. He looked certain. His gaze dropped to the photograph in my hands, then lifted to my face. Claire Bennett, he said quietly, like he was trying on a lie that had finally worn too thin. That is not the name you were born with, is it? The room seemed to tilt under my feet. I held the photograph so tightly the edge pressed into my palm, but I barely felt it. All I could hear was that name echoing through me like it had been waiting in some locked room of my body all along. Daisy, a name buried under years of paperwork, bus schedules, rent notices, and ordinary survival. A name my mother had erased so completely that sometimes I had convinced myself I had imagined it. Adrian took one slow step closer, not enough to crowd me, just enough to make it impossible to pretend this was some strange coincidence. Answer me, he said softly. Not harsh, not raised. Somehow that made it harder. I swallowed, but my throat felt tight. My mother changed it when I was 6. His eyes did not leave my face. After Brooklyn. It was not a question. My fingers trembled around the frame. How do you know that? For the first time since I had met him, something moved across his expression that looked almost like memory. Not fondness. Not regret. Something heavier. Because your mother disappeared the same week, my father sent half the city looking for her. Cold spread through my chest, sharp and immediate. Why would your father be looking for my mother? Adrian's gaze dropped briefly to the photograph, then rose again with devastating steadiness. Because Elena Rossi did not just vanish with her daughter, he said. She vanished with proof. I stared at him, the word landing harder than it should have. Proof. Not money. Not jewelry. Not some dramatic secret hidden in a movie safe. Proof. The kind of thing that could survive years. The kind of thing people might still want. My mother was a waitress, I whispered. She worked nights. She forgot birthdays. She burned grilled cheese sandwiches and cried when she thought I was asleep. She was not part of. I looked around at the penthouse, at him, at the impossible world pressing in from every side. She was not part of this. Adrian's jaw tightened, just once. No, he said quietly. She was not supposed to be. Thunder rolled beyond the glass, low and distant, and I felt the city below us like a second heartbeat. Everything I thought I knew about myself had cracked open in less than an hour. My name, my mother, the men outside the diner. Adrian watched me like he knew exactly what it cost to have the ground vanish under you. Why save me? I asked, and this time my voice broke. He did not look away. I did not open that car door because you were stranded, he said. I opened it because the moment they found you, this was never going to be your old life again. 2 dying Cambridge on a rain-soaked New York night. A stranded waitress steps into the car of a feared mafia boss and discovers that missing one bus can destroy an old life and awaken a buried identity. This dark romance blends danger, longing, class contrast, and hidden history as the waitress is pulled into a world of private towers, silent protection, and secrets tied to her mother's past. The mafia boss is not offering kindness. He is offering control, safety, and answers she never knew she needed. As tension rises and memories surface, dark romance turns into obsession, dark romance turns into mystery, and dark romance turns into fate. With cinematic emotion, sharp dialogue, and a haunting slow-burn connection, this dark romance story follows 2 souls trapped between fear and destiny. For viewers who love dark romance with emotional twists, powerful men, vulnerable heroines, and revelation-driven storytelling, this tale delivers atmosphere, suspense, and unforgettable chemistry. Character 1. A white American waitress, 24 years old, front-facing portrait, soaked black diner uniform, tired eyes, natural wet hair, pale skin, realistic facial features, cinematic lighting, emotionally vulnerable, no jewelry, urban realism, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Character 2. A white American mafia boss, 32-year-old front-facing portrait, sharp jawline, dark hair brushed back, clean-shaven face, pale skin, dark tailored suit, cold steady eyes, cinematic lighting, powerful presence, realistic features, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. For a highly dramatic penthouse confrontation scene featuring both main characters and a refined antagonist presence without graphic action. Character 1 is a white American waitress, 24 years old, pale skin, damp natural hair, wearing a black diner uniform or slightly oversized dry borrowed clothing, standing near a shelf and holding an old framed photograph with trembling hands. Her expression is stunned, fearful, and emotionally exposed, as if she has just discovered that her identity is not what she believed. Character 2 is a white American mafia boss, 32 years old, pale skin, dark brushed back hair, clean-shaven, wearing a dark tailored suit, positioned several steps in front of her with a protective but territorial posture. His expression is controlled, intense, and quietly dangerous. Across from them stands an older, elegant rival figure in an expensive suit with 2 blurred men behind him, implying threat through posture and presence alone. The penthouse living room is warm lit with dark wood, marble, rain-dark windows, and a charged silence. Character 1 is caught between past and present while Character 2 stands as the barrier between her and danger. Cinematic realism, emotional storytelling, no violence shown, no gore, no title, no poster text, no illustration, no CGI, no cartoon. 1, 2.